let's talk about home composting. In my house, I do basically four types of home composting. Three of them are cold composting, which are more appropriate in my opinion, and one of them is hot composting. In a little bit, I will show you quickly the compost pile, a hot compost pile that I made for the next practical. But today we're going to talk about cold composting, especially the typical cold composting that you would expect, and another type that is in-situ composting. All right. So in-situ composting also I will show you in a bit. So this here is, as I show you in my last practical, this is this ugly thing is what currently is my cold composting pile. What is the process of cold composting? The cold composting goes like this. Everything you have generating daily, you will just bring it, throw it in your cold compost pile and cover it with some brown. So you get your greens that are being generated in your kitchen, and whatever green that a low carbon to nitrogen ratio material, whatever low carbon to nitrogen ratio material you get, you will come bring it to your cold composting, and you will throw some high carbon to nitrogen ratio material on top of that. So I'm not really satisfied with the setup that I have here. What I'm improving on this setup is now I will use something like this. Yeah. Why do I choose this type of setup now is because there's plenty of room for air to come through, yeah, and we don't want to generate anaerobic conditions. So to avoid anaerobic conditions, what we really want is to have a pile of cold compost which is not too large. The second thing is we want to have something that air can easily go in. So the typical cold composting bins that you find on the market, they are completely enclosed. The reason is that people want to hide their garbage, they want to hide the ugly things from the waste, but at the same time, if you cover completely your compost, that will create anaerobic conditions, will make it hard, becomes highly compacted, and generates these anaerobic conditions. The decomposition is very slow, and this is exactly what you don't want. So what I recommend is you make this cold composting seasonally, which means that you will do this for 3 or 4 months or even 6 months. Put in your garbage, your organic wastes, slowly, and covering that with browns. Bring the greens, the fresh organic waste, and cover that with browns in the way that will avoid pests and will avoid bad smells. By the end, when you stop, when you have this filled up, you will stop adding material, and you will start a new one. And if you want, you even can remove the top of it. And if you leave it for 1 more month, after that you can sieve it and use it in your garden. So it's that simple, no turning, no big management. It's just pile up all the garbage that you generate. The big careful thing that you need, the big thing you need to be careful about is that you will need to always be adding browns to compensate for the greens you generate. You don't want to add only greens or too much of the greens, otherwise you will generate anaerobic conditions. So what I will do here, just a quick demonstration, what will be the continuation of my home composting is you start by adding a good amount of browns. In my case would be paper. Yeah? I will have a good amount of paper to start with, and then I will start with my kitchen waste on top of this. And every time I add my kitchen waste, then I add a little bit more of the browns on top of it. Could be leaves, could be anything that is high carbon to nitrogen ratio material. Then you cover cover your kitchen waste, and the only thing you need to be careful is that you don't want this to become dry, so the kitchen waste will give a little bit of moisture, but you also want to water once in a while, once a week at least, you want to water this compost bin. So what materials do I bring here? Everything that I don't add to the vermicompost, I bring to my cold compost. So this is the rule of thumb I have. Some things I know that the worms love, and the things that the worms love, I give it to the worms, and the other things that they don't like as much, I bring it to the cold composting. And I will show you here some of the beds that I've built just using this method. With all my organic waste, I've been able to make quite a lot of compost, and I've been gardening with this for a while. So you see here this raised bed is made with recycled wood, and all this material here is coming from my own compost. Compost I generate, and some soil that I mixed with it also, but the majority of it is compost. So you can see here how rich this material is. Sometimes when I do the compost, I add a little bit of soil to the compost also, so it's a very good soil that I made here. Okay, so this is end of season, so there's not many plants, but if it was like 2 months ago, you would see this would be quite full. I will show you also another raised bed that I had here on the other side also, which also was made in the same style. And I have here bougainvillea and other plants, but all the rest of the plants from the season are gone. And here is the pile of the hot compost that I just made. I made this I started yesterday actually, and I finished today. So here I show the time lapse of making the compost. First I bake some big pieces of cardboard to absorb the leachates that may come through when I water the compost. And after that I start with some 1-to-1 proportion of grass clippings, which are the greens. The first I had some leaves that I used as browns, and second day I continued with paper because I ended up without enough browns to finish the pile. The boxes here is just for sustaining the pile and not spreading it all around, so trying to make a more vertical pile. If you see the fork on the bottom, on the back, is just to give it a hole on the pile, and that will work as a chimney for the air, the hot air to come through the pile. And basically that's the proportion, 1-to-1, and water at the end. And there is here a thermometer that I add here. Let me check if we can catch the temperature of this. A little bit hard. I just finished this now, but it's about 40 degrees. Tomorrow I will show again, and next week I will explain more about the hot composting process at home. But actually you just want to do hot composting when you grab a huge amount of greens. If you have small amount of greens coming every day, what you actually want to do is cold composting and vermicomposting. Hot composting only when you grab a huge amount of greens that you can build up a pile at once. So here I got grass clippings from the neighborhood, and I made it mixing with paper. So now let's talk about in-situ composting. If you only add browns on the top of your garden soil, this is what we call mulching. What we mean by in-situ composting is when you add the greens on the surface of your soil and then cover that with browns. And I really do not recommend burying this because it reduces the aeration process. So I just recommend scratching to the side the browns, add in your greens, as you see here, my kitchen waste. Spread it so that it's not more than 5 centimeters high, and then at the end just cover that with browns. So if you think about it, the in-situ composting is the way of nature of doing composting. You don't have to transport, you don't have to sieve it, It doesn't generate any odors. It does not affect negatively the plants. If you have any leachate, it goes directly into the soil and it's stabilized on the soil. So there are only positives of doing in situ composting. So it's the lazy way, the easy way of doing it, and there's no downsides from doing it directly on the soil. The only downside is that if you have your plant density is too high, you will end up without having space for doing this on the surface of your soil. But otherwise, this is the easy way of doing it. I've been doing it for a long time, and there's absolutely no problem on doing this at all. So really recommend it. The last way of doing compost is vermicompost, but I will reserve vermicompost for the next practical, and I will explain vermicompost really well next lecture. Thank you.